it's important to recognize that as other nations are dealing with this issue, so are other states in the nation. And I am happy at this moment to be able to pass the baton to Devin Fidler, who, as I mentioned earlier, is with the Institute for the Future.
Yeah, certainly. So thank you for the opportunity to participate today. So just a little bit of context. The Institute for the Future is a 48-year-old nonprofit research center based in Palo Alto that was originally founded by a group of engineers who were on something called the ARPANET. So before the internet, there was the ARPANET, you know, the early Defense Department network of computers. And back when there were just 8 of them, they basically, this group of engineers created the Institute as a place to sort of look at the implications of this beyond just the engineering. And I think this problem is very much in that space, right? So one of the things we've been doing quite a bit is working with governments, both regional governments and national governments, to think about how to respond to this shifting environment. So I think the first point is that there is a sense, you know, I've just come just this last week from an open innovation forum in Europe, and I think there's a sense now at a global scale that we really are at a pivot point, that it is the case that I think everything Mike laid out is perfectly true, but even more immediately we're seeing a change in the nature of work and in the nature of organizations. If you look at sort of the companies, you know, my organization's based in Silicon Valley. If you look at the companies that are getting a lot of attention in Silicon Valley right now, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Kickstarters, all of them work on business models that really couldn't have existed 20 years ago. They all employ technologies in ways that, you know, would not have been possible, you know, a decade or two ago. That's, I think, really interesting. The idea that technology is not only impacting jobs as we know them, but also impacting organizations as we know them. And that's a big part of what the Institute is looking at. What that translates to at the governmental level is people beginning to rethink. I think Mike touched on the importance of education in this environment. So looking at what skills are becoming more valuable in an increasingly automated environment is one thing we've done quite a bit of. You can imagine skills that are really difficult to be captured by automation. Things like sense making, social intelligence. Even ability to use new kinds of media, right? A literacy with new kinds of media, all increasing in value. Alongside that, skills in the computational area, right? Skills like computational thinking also becoming more valuable. So definitely a rethinking of how to get a workforce together that really can take advantage of these tools that Mike's described as they're emerging, and potentially kind of move out of the way before traditional jobs are automated. The other piece I think that's very interesting is a sort of strategic level conversation. So there are countries and states as well beginning to rethink their position economically as a result of this. When we saw the emergence of globalization, we saw something very similar. Countries kind of realigning themselves to position themselves relative to this big shift, right? Now we're seeing, for example, China has just created a unified reputation system for all internet platforms. So if you have a reputation on, say, Airbnb, that doesn't necessarily transfer to your reputation on Uber here, but China has been thinking about this and decided, oh, well, what we're going to do is create a unified reputation system. And perhaps ominously, they've included some civic measures as well. So your kind of credit score for online platform use and your citizenry score are mixed in some ways. Again, sort of an ominous signal, but I think a sign that something really big is shifting. We've spoken with some Southeast Asian countries that are actually thinking of making revenue from international freelancing tax-free as a way to create really, much as China made itself the workshop of the world when countries are now looking at this emergence of freelancing work, this emergence of platform work, and thinking, oh, well, what if we could position ourselves to, kind of most effectively take advantage of that? I was in the Philippines recently, and there's actually a statue in the Philippines dedicated to the freelance worker, right? Kind of a monument to freelance work. I think there's a sense of, this is a new source of international cash flows that's going to, kind of going to increase over time, and positioning relative to that is really key. And then final point, that extends to the local level as well. So we've worked with a couple of state governments and one city office of economic and workforce opportunities now to really rethink, in this environment, how do you maximize the positives of automation and freelancing while minimizing the negatives? So on the one hand, as Mike pointed out, these technologies can potentially erode the middle class if handled poorly, or transfer risk to risks or additional costs to the workers. But they can also open up new, new ways of working. It's possible to be far more flexible. It does create a new level of entrepreneurship, so individuals are, kind of able to get much more agency over how they work and what their work looks like. And then also, very interestingly, it gives people access to productive capacity. So anyone listening to this broadcast right now could go on to a freelancing platform like, say, Mechanical Turk, or better, kind of better suited for this, something like Upwork, and actually hire your own staff and begin to, kind of produce. You can use Alibaba to access manufacturing production capacity. This is something new, and I think really requires us to rethink some of the assumptions we have about how jobs and job growth traditionally work. I think in this environment, it becomes important to really go back to the drawing board and say, okay, some of what we know traditionally is true, but some of what we know, or what we think we know, isn't true in this environment. So I think there's a big rush right now to begin to sort that out, right? Look at what has changed in this environment, and what really is, kind of a continuity, and we can rely on received wisdom.